Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of College Hockey Talk. On today's podcast, I'm joined by a very special guest, Florida Panthers sideline reporter Katie Gaus. Welcome to the podcast, Katie, and how's everything going?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Things are going great here in Florida. The weather is nice, and the Panthers are playing pretty well right now, so things are about as good as they can get for me personally and for the team.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And obviously, the Panthers are right now the number one team in the league. What makes this Panthers team special compared to the other teams in the Central Division?
Oh my goodness. Well, even the team, personally compared to the team last year, we've just got so many new pieces that seem to just somehow be fitting perfectly. I was a little skeptical heading into the season with so many, changes happening with the new GM, how this was going to work, how the guys were going to adjust, especially given the shorter time frame for things in terms of a start to the season and training camp. But this group has just somehow meshed so well. They have an unbelievable chemistry. And really in the last few games, we've started to see it that they have this really great love for each other that just seems to motivate them, to have them playing so much harder for each other, all pushing in the right direction and all pulling the rope in the same direction. It's a very unselfish team, and it's just been a really fun group to cover. In terms of how they differ from the Central Division teams, this team is fast. I know there's speed across the NHL, but it really seems like this season the team has really kind of latched on to this speedy team identity, and they're giving teams they play against a lot of trouble. We saw that most recently with the series against Chicago. So if they can keep up their fast play with this good conditioning, I think they're going to be dangerous down the stretch.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think that series against the Islanders in last year's playoffs helped motivate this team for how they're doing this year? Because obviously it was a little disappointing on how they performed.
Absolutely. I think getting that little bit of a taste of the so-called postseason, although it was a little strange being in the bubble, definitely left them feeling like they had something they had left on the table. But I think even more than that is just kind of the history with this team of, they haven't really had a strong run since the 96 season. And it's just something that I think over time has been talked about and talked about. And now finally they're like, all right, enough is enough. We know what we need to do, and we're finally ready to get there. So I think between, like you said, the season not ending on the right foot for them with the Islanders and just the history here in Florida, they've got a lot of motivation.
Yeah, definitely. And talk about the Central Division and what's it like playing or covering that division? Because I'm out here in the East Coast watching the Bruins play, so I haven't been really watching the Central Division that closely, and it's weird not playing the Panthers and Lightning on a
I
consistent.
know. Well, you know what? I was just talking to someone today, and I was telling them they were talking about the Bruins, and I said to myself,
Yeah.
I don't even know what's going on with Boston. I mean, I try to pay attention to the entire NHL, but when you don't play teams, it's easy to forget about them and not follow them as closely. And so I hadn't even paid attention to the Bruins. For me, covering the Central, it's fun. We're getting some teams that we've seen before. Obviously, we can't get away from Tampa. And Carolina has been a really exciting opponent for us as well. But just getting to see that mix of, Dallas and Nashville. Chicago is a team that, it's really fun for us to play, especially with all the history with Coach Q, having been there for so long. So certainly a lot of exciting storylines, although this year I will say with us as media not getting to travel, it's very different. And with these teams we're playing, I would have loved to be on the road going to Nashville and Texas
Yeah.
and Chicago on a regular basis, because those are all some great cities. But no, other than, the fact that we're starting to get sick of seeing the same teams over and over again, everyone's dealing with that problem. But I think the Central Division is proving, to be really competitive. I think every division has started to sort of separate from the pack. You've got your top teams and then more of your bottom teams. But overall, I love the competitiveness of this division. And, it's definitely fun to see some different faces on a more regular basis.
Yeah, no, I can definitely attest to that because being a Bruins fan, you're seeing a lot of the Washington Capitals and Pittsburgh Penguins, and those teams you normally only play like 3 times a year. So it's weird seeing those teams more on a consistent basis than teams like Tampa and Florida. And it seems like watching the Central Division, there's a lot of young players on all these teams, especially with teams like Detroit, Chicago, and Nashville. Has it been cool for yourself to see some of these young players emerge into the league and have the success that they're having?
Absolutely. And for me personally, I spent a good amount of time, covering prospects and working in the USHL. So for myself, I really have grown to enjoy the stories of prospects, as their careers have developed. And so to now be in the NHL and starting to see the guys that I was covering when they were younger coming through and making their mark and emerging has been really exciting. I just love covering that. And I know obviously, with your podcast having a college hockey focus, that you get to enjoy that and see those storylines all the time. But certainly it's been interesting. And I mean, even outside of the Central Division, you've got crazy stuff happening up in Minnesota with Kaprizov. I mean, just so many cool storylines to be following. And I've always got a soft spot for the rookies. So it's been great to see.
Yeah, I know. Who's been the biggest rookie for the Panthers this year? Because for the Bruins, it's been Trent Frederick. He played for Wisconsin. He's an absolute beast. I love his game. Who's the rookie for the Panthers that stood out for you the most?
Oh gosh. Well, this there's choices all the time, but I guess for me, and it doesn't necessarily feel like he's a rookie because we've been talking about him for a long time, but he is still, under that category. I would say Owen Tippett. He's really starting to find his groove and his consistency in the lineup. And, he's on I think a 4-game point streak right now. So it's just great to see him finally hitting his stride. He's got an absolutely wicked shot, which is part of the reason that, he was drafted in the first place as high as he was. But, it starts to see like he's finding his place. He's kind of creating that professional pro hockey identity. And it's been great to see him contributing and flying up and down the ice. And so, I've been interviewing him more and more and getting to know him. So it's been really fun to watch. The hardest part is just that since we have, less access to these guys, we aren't getting to see them on a regular basis as much as we used to and have those little one-off conversations to find out more about them personally. But I'm hoping that's something that comes back because, it's definitely the best part of this job is to get to know these guys. And when they're rookies, they're a little bit more relaxed and kind of green to the whole, experience. So you can really have some cool relationships built from those years.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. How has the pandemic affected your job covering the NHL and being a broadcaster, and how have you adapted to those challenges?
Oh, well, geez. I mean, a lot of the adaptations have just kind of come based on all the technology that we have. I mean, I can't really take any credit. We've just been given so many great platforms to use between Zoom calls and different ways that we've been doing the broadcasts, talking over headsets. But, for me, my job on a normal game day would be going to morning skate, spending the whole morning in the room, getting my stories, having one-on-one conversations with guys. And then, getting on the bus with them, traveling back and forth. We'd fly on the plane together, and you just get to build so many cool relationships that way. So for me personally, now everything is separate. I'm doing all of my interviews through Zoom like we are right now. Even our post game is all Zoom. I, talk to the guys. I sit in the suite by myself in the arena with a camera and across the way a light and no one around me, so it's very lonely and very isolated, a totally different vibe from a season ago where I'd be down at ice level along the glass surrounded by fans. And then we do our interviews through a headset, so the guys are basically just looking off into space, hearing my voice from afar, not knowing where I am or what I'm saying or how I'm looking, anything like that. So it's definitely different. I miss those, locker room, post-game interviews and those intermission interviews where the guys would walk right out of the tunnel. Because I feel like as the reporter, more than any of the other broadcasters, I really have the most one-on-one time with the guys in terms of the actual job itself, getting all those interview questions in. So it's been an adjustment, and I think I give so much credit to everyone that's made it happen at all. I'm just glad to be covering the games, but I definitely would be remiss if I didn't say I hope it goes back to normal and that next season I'm back in my little bubble down by the ice, getting to see the guys on a more regular basis. But like I said, we're happy to have hockey at all, so we'll take it for now.
Definitely. I think things should be getting back to normal as the months go on, especially towards the summer where more people are getting vaccinated. Now, I've only done interviews through Zoom, so I really don't know what's it like to have an in-person interview. However, you've been doing in-person interviews and Zoom interviews as well. What's the main differences you notice between the two mediums?
Oh, I guess I think the biggest thing that stands out for me is that, one, when you're not in person and you're dealing, especially in hockey, a lot of the times with a guy who maybe doesn't speak English as well, there's a lot of like hand gestures and body language and like little ad-libbing, so to speak, that you kind of help them through questions. And I think the guys are maybe a little bit more comfortable when they have you right there, sort of, helping them through it, so to speak. This year, I've noticed, at least on my level, when I'm interviewing guys that I have never really seen in person who don't know me, it feels a little bit more awkward. And so when I have that in-person relationship and then I'm interviewing them in person, I think that it just comes across a little bit more genuine. The answers are maybe a little bit more thought out. This season, I think it's maybe a little easier for the guys to hit us with some of the cliches and get the answers and the questions over with and the interviews over with a little faster than they would maybe if we were in person. The other thing that stands out is just the exciting moments and the fun moments. You don't get to have those as much. There's not really that opportunity to laugh when a guy says something funny when you're kind of connected by a computer or by a headset. So I just think you're missing some of those little, like, more just human, natural interactions when you are doing it over Zoom or over a headset compared to doing it in person. And you have to also be a lot more prepared, because it's not, you can't really play off of their answers the way you maybe normally would in an in-person interview. You have to really kind of know what you're going to say.
Yeah, definitely, especially interviewing guys like Keith Yando, who's apparently the funniest guy in the league, and it's hard not to do those ones in person because it makes
It
it
certainly is.
definitely. Now, this is a college hockey podcast, like many people know. So, talking to you before the interview, you said your dad played college hockey and your boyfriend coaches college hockey as well. So, how
Yes.
often do you watch college hockey on a daily basis?
Well, I watch it a lot. And so my dad played D3 at Geneseo, actually, where I went to college. Then my brother played Division I at Yale after playing in the USHL. So I watched a lot for that. And my boyfriend actually is currently an assistant coach with Robert Morris, who just unfortunately got knocked out of their Atlantic Hockey Conference playoffs. But certainly between watching his games, watching my brother's games, and having played, worked in the USHL and watching those guys play all the time, I feel like I like to follow up on a lot of kids that I built relationships with growing up in that, in that sector, and watching guys in that league. So I watch a good bit. And then ironically, we have prospects who are still in college, and one of them, Spencer Knight, is
Mhm.
playing right now as we're recording this. So I've been trying to follow along and watch the Boston College game, because he just got named Hockey East Player of the Year, which for a goaltender is not something that happens all the time, which is really great. And I'm actually planning on using it as a story. So I'm like kind of following up, and I definitely keep an eye on what our prospects in the college space are doing.
Definitely, I'm watching the game as we're doing the interview right now. So I
There
know.
you go.
But no, it's really exciting. Obviously, he won the World Juniors with the USA team, and he's obviously, I think, a top 10 finalist for the Hobie Baker Award this
Yeah, he
year.
is.
So he's a really good goalie, and I'm interested to see how well he fits in the NHL, especially with Sergei Bobrovsky on the Panthers roster, how well they can do together.
Oh, I know. I think we're all really excited about Spencer making the jump and getting here. And, I have a feeling he may, after this season, make that switch over to pro and get his feet wet in the AHL next year. So we have like tons of confidence in him. I mean, he's proven it over and over again. And I just think his demeanor sets him up to be such a good pro. And I think he can learn from Bob. I think they'll have a really good working relationship, very competitive, and it'll allow both of them to grow as goalies. So he is easily one of the most exciting and up and coming buzz type players in this whole organization. Everybody's very, very excited about what Spencer Knight's going to bring.
Yeah, and also Devin Levi, the Canadian junior
I
goalies.
know.
So you guys have a lot of good goalies coming down in the pipeline, so I'm interested to see how that works out. Now, your brother played college hockey. Have you had the chance to go to some of his games? Because the Yale rink, also known as the Whale, is really cool
Yes.
to visit.
It's an awesome spot. I actually was able to get to a few games there. And of course, it was during the time when fans were there, which made it way better. I think one game I went to, they were playing Cornell, who travels a really good crowd. So it was packed. And yeah, that's a cool rink. Has that whale fin look on the inside and outside. It's a really, with the wood ceiling, very classic college hockey barn. I've gotten the chance, I've been lucky enough to get to a few different rinks over the course of of my lifetime, between RIT. I worked up in that region. I've been up to some of the places in Maine. I've seen St. Lawrence has an unbelievable new rink, the Appleton rink. I got a personal tour of that one, so I've gotten to see that. So college hockey barns are absolutely some of my favorites, and I love the smaller ones that have all the history. Even my own college, it was just D3, but it's got a special place in my heart. The little wooden stands that look like they'd fold up in the basketball style. So definitely some good barns out there. But yeah, Yale's a special one, and I've caught a few games and enjoyed it. And New Haven has great pizza, so that was another bonus.
I've never been to Yale before, but I have to go someday and try out the pizza because everyone says it's the best. I'm more of a fan of the new school college hockey rinks, some of the new arenas with like the cool facilities and stuff. That's maybe because I don't know, maybe just because I'm into more of the new school stuff. Like Mullen Center, like they redid their arena. That's a really cool spot to see. And again, this is obviously kind of a relatively new arena. So I think that's a cool spot to visit. Now, have you gotten the chance to watch any other Panthers prospects in college hockey this season? I know Carter Berger, he plays for UConn. He's a Panthers prospect. Trying to think of any other Panthers prospects that are in college hockey at the moment.
No, I haven't watched a ton of them, honestly, just with the way the schedules have been so packed. There's really not too much time that you're not playing hockey yourself. So unfortunately, and I apologize to all the other prospects out there, it's been hard to find time to watch all the games. But I know last year we also had a guy who was at UNH who's now made the jump and was at our team. So Gildon. So certainly it's been good. But for me, I think most of the time I spend watching our prospects is actually at the World Juniors, and I'm so glad they were able to pull that off because that's easily one of my favorite events in all of hockey. Pro, college, junior, anything. That event is special, and I'm glad they pulled it off. And of course, it was even better that US won, but regardless, that's a special event. And for me personally, something that would be a dream to cover someday. And I just think it's one of the best experiences in the world for the players and for the broadcasters.
Definitely. No, it's fun watching that, obviously, since USA won as well. And for all the Panthers fans that are listening to this podcast, Carter Berger, he's a defenseman from UConn. He's really good. He has a lot of solid skills that will make him – he's a great skater, great passer, and he creates a lot of offensive chances, especially on the power play. So I can't wait to see how he translates into the NHL in a few years once he leaves UConn.
Yeah, and you reminded me actually that made me think of another one. We had Ty Smolanic. He had a great year at Quinnipiac. So I would be remiss. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him. He just came to my mind. I wanted to throw it out before I forgot.
Yeah, no, I was trying to think. I was like, there's one more that had a really good year. And
he had a really good year.
Yeah, he was great. A great freshman for Quinnipiac, so he's going to be a great player in the next few years as well. Now, I want to transition a little bit and talk about the beginning of your media career. So you're from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Talk about growing up there and what inspired you to start a career in sports media.
Well, I mean, growing up in Pittsburgh, it was an absolute treat because I was, in high school when the Penguins really started becoming great again. So that was just awesome hockey to watch all the time. I remember running around in my cul-de-sac after they won that cup in '09. So, certainly a good place to be in terms of being a hockey fan. But for me personally, in terms of actually coming up with this idea of this being my career, I had no plans for it when I entered college. I had played hockey growing up, but I had actually done acting and musicals and had fun with all that performing stuff. But when I entered college, I was actually set up at school in Duquesne, which was in Pittsburgh, to be a physician's assistant. And I was going to go into the medical field, and I wanted to eventually focus on maybe sports medicine or something like that. So I knew I liked sports, but when that didn't work out and I switched and went to Geneseo as a transfer that second semester of my freshman year, I realized, obviously they had a great hockey team. My dad had played there. And one thing led to another. I met the right people. I was still undecided as a major and ended up meeting the director of radio there. And his name was Mike Safran. And, between him and a few other people, I expressed my interest in maybe getting involved in some way with the hockey team. And so at first I was working in the athletic training room, helping out with ice bags and wrapping up injuries and stuff. And then I slowly but surely made my way to between the benches, standing on the ice and doing the sideline reporting for the radio station WGSU there. And that was all happening in the second half of my freshman year. And then into my sophomore year, I really picked it up even more. But the very first time that I stood between the benches, and this is no joke, I did the first game, we lost literally 10-0. It was horrifying. Like, for your very first game reporting to be covering that big of a loss. But I just got such an adrenaline rush, had so much fun. It just being there, watching that hockey that close, I just knew from that exact moment, okay, I don't know exactly how this is going to work out, but I know this is what I want to do. And so over the course of my college career, I continued to pursue ways to build a resume, and I ended up actually getting an opportunity to work for the Rochester Americans, and I was a broadcasting intern with them in the AHL. And I spent 2 seasons with them, got the most incredible uh, just mentorship and experience from my time there. Brian Darrow is the name of my boss, and I always have to make sure I give him a shout out because he's one of the people I credit to the success that I've been able to have. He taught me almost everything that I knew early on and has helped me grow. But he gave me the opportunity to do anything I wanted, on camera, editing, everything. I just felt like I was such a well-rounded broadcaster after my 2 seasons there. And when I graduated, I wasn't sure what to do next. I thought, okay, if I want to be a Fox Sports broadcaster, how do I do that? So I said, okay, well, most people start working as a network reporter at a lower level TV station, so like local television. So I was lucky enough as my first job in 2015 out of college to get a position in sports directly, which isn't easy to do. And I'm very lucky I got that, working in Erie, PA for a local small station. I was the first ever female anchor in the entire region because it's still not super common, but it's becoming so much more normal. And I did that for a year and realized I don't really like working in local sports. I was covering volleyball and soccer and baseball, and nothing wrong with any of those sports, but I just really missed hockey and wanted to focus on hockey. So I went back to the drawing board, got my master's online through Syracuse University's program. The Newhouse School obviously has a really great reputation, and I was fortunate that they had online programs that would allow me to become a part of that network without physically going to Syracuse. And I ended up in Chicago working at the USHL, finishing my master's. And it's a really weird path. Like, if you were to sit down and look at most people that are in my career, they probably wouldn't have taken so many strange curves and turns. But at the end of the day, I always try to find a way to position myself somewhere in the hockey world to continue to build those connections and network myself through people in the sport. And I was fortunate when Florida had an opportunity that I was able to land it. And it was the most stressful interview audition process of my life. But every step of the way that I had built up to there helped me get this job. And so I can't really credit all of those crazy, weird experiences enough now that I finally have landed here in what I consider to be my dream job. But it's been an interesting ride. So moral of that whole story is just, if you don't think you're on a normal path, it doesn't mean that you're not somehow on track to do what you want to do. It just, everyone has their own way of getting there.
Yeah, definitely. And is there like a particular sideline reporter or broadcaster that you look up to and try to take away from?
You know what? For the longest time when I was starting out, Catherine Tappan was just making the jump from Nesson over to the NHL Network before she obviously now is with NBC Sports. But I really loved all of her work, especially when she was still doing a lot more on the sidelines. And then she kind of transitioned into more of an anchor role. But she was just, I don't even know if I necessarily was focusing on her work, but just her in general. She was just such an inspiration. In terms of like actual sideline reporters, for myself, like I never even really feel like there were that many women in the hockey sphere that there was someone directly to look to. So I was kind of just watching any woman that had anything to do with hockey, and Catherine Tappan was just really that big name in ice hockey that at the time I was getting into it was really stood out. And to this day, I still look up to her and her work, and say for myself that a goal would be to somehow find a way to be involved with NHL Network, as a correspondent or something in that nature. But yeah, she certainly is a trailblazer for women in hockey, and someone that I've always been really inspired by.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I've been a huge fan of Catherine Tappan since I'm a Bruins fan, so I remember watching her on
Right.
NESN early on, and then obviously what she's doing now with NBC is incredible to watch, especially since how she has such a good dynamic with some of the analysts there, like Patrick Sharp, Anson Carter, and when she was with Doc Emmerich for a little bit, it was a great dynamic to watch as a viewer, and it really helps me as a podcaster now have that like host mentality, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, she's a great example. She's just really good at directing conversation and so well respected, which I think is the biggest thing. You can tell that the guys that she's working with, understand her knowledge and respect her knowledge and her involvement in the game, and it definitely translates.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing to know because I think it helps the dynamic for a conversation as well, especially at a network. Because if you don't have the respect for your colleagues, then the viewer can notice when the conversation is just not working.
Absolutely.
Now, you were talking about how you went to SUNY Geneseo. Hopefully, I said that correctly. I apologize.
Geneseo, it's a tough
Geneseo.
one.
Um, what made you want to go there at the end of the day, and how did that school help prepare you for your broadcasting career now?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I knew I wanted to transfer, and I was lucky enough that my dad, and my mom actually had both gone there. So, my dad had a lot of good, connections. And basically, I was a little late to the game in transferring. So, when he reached out to a few people that he knew in admissions, they were definitely willing to look at my application, even though it was a little later in the game. And I was really lucky that as a transfer, I had good enough grades to get in because that's a pretty tough school. And I don't know if I had applied right as a freshman, if I would have gotten in, but as a transfer, I made the cut. So I was lucky that I had that opportunity. I knew it was somewhere that I loved because I had been there, as a kid, I'd gotten to visit. It's a really small school in a small town, kind of in the middle of nowhere, but has a great little main street and all the things that I wanted out of a college experience. But the fact that it was a smaller school was kind of the biggest factor, I think, in allowing me to take advantage of it in the sense that even though they didn't really have a broadcasting or sports broadcasting department, which they didn't, they just had communications really. They were so willing to let you try anything and find ways to make opportunities for students. And the nice thing was that at a small school, didn't have to wait till I was a junior or senior to get involved. As a freshman, I came in, I wanted to try something, and we found a way to make it happen. So I credit the small school, mentality to that a lot. They had good hockey, which is all I cared about. There was no football. And then also I ended up actually getting to play D3 field hockey for a year and made some great friends from that side of it. Which I wouldn't have been able to do at another school because I wasn't really that good, but I worked hard and I trained hard and I got to be on a team. So just all the great things that a Division III school allows you. But it definitely just set me up with really good connections, and it was part of the reason I got the Amherst internship through people I knew at school that had connections with Rochester. So ultimately, if it led me to Rochester, which led me to everything else, then it was very important.
Yeah, that's good to hear because I go to a small school as well. So it's like inspiring to me to know that people who else went to small schools have had success like you have. So it's good to hear that. Now, like you were saying, you also played D3 field hockey there as well. Talk about what it was like being a student athlete, and does having that experience being a student athlete help you in media today?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think whenever you can experience the daily grind of playing college sports, then you get a little bit of a better sense. And like I said, I wasn't an all-star. I actually never really played in a game. I was more of a bench warmer slash practice hero. And I still had a lot of fun doing it. But again, I was at every practice. We were getting up for 2 days. In the summer, we'd come back to campus early. So you get to understand what an athlete's schedule is like. And I think, college is a really strong way to prepare guys to be pro because it gets them familiar with being regimented. So for myself, having experience, the schedule of wake up, practice, team meal, pregame meetings, traveling, getting back late, waking up early for class, you just get to sort of familiarize yourself with what the grind is like. So that when you're interviewing these athletes who are playing on a much higher level, which you can imagine is 10 times more stressful, 10 times more regimented, you have a little bit of a taste, at least, of what it was like. So for me, getting just that experience of being an athlete in some way and having that, knowledge was really helpful. But for me in my career now, the most important thing I think was just playing hockey a little bit growing up, but ultimately growing up in a hockey family. You know, between my dad, my brother, my boyfriend now, I'm able to learn so much from them every single time we speak, every time we would watch games. You know, the knowledge you pick up from someone who's played the game at a high level is invaluable. So every time I can talk to my brother or my dad about what they're seeing, you know, they're always texting me during Panthers games and letting me know, wow, that was a really great play, or hey, I wonder why coach made that decision. Like it definitely is a family affair when it comes to my reporting, and I'm really lucky to have all that support and a hockey family. You know, the hockey world is very small, and having a hockey family was a huge part.
Yeah, and you also graduated at the Newhouse School of Communication at Syracuse University. How'd you get the opportunity to go there at that prestigious program? Because every time I look at the alumni who went to Newhouse, it's just like insane to see.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. That's pretty much one of the main reasons that I wanted to try to get myself into that mix. My mom's from Syracuse, actually, originally, so I had been to the school before, seen the campus. When I kind of realized I didn't want to be a local sports reporter, but didn't have another job, I said, okay, well, I don't want to do nothing, and I wasn't sure what the next step was. So, you know, actually, my mom was like, hey, you know, have you ever looked into what grad school opportunities there are? And when you think of sports broadcasting, like you said, with the alumni they have, you think of house school at Syracuse. And so I started doing a little digging and found out they actually had an online program, which is huge because I wasn't really in a spot to go move somewhere. I was still, you know, graduated enough that I was in my professional life. I didn't really want to go back to the full-time student world, and they had the best of both worlds. And so I got to, you know, complete that program in about a year to 2 years online. Add Newhouse to my resume, join that Newhouse Mafia. And I will definitely say getting into the online program was probably easier than their in-person program, because the in-person program is way more involved. But I had kind of gotten a lot of the experience in broadcasting already, so I was really more interested in, you know, just joining it for the networking purposes, for some of the professors they had that I got to learn from, and it definitely just made me more well-rounded in terms of just a different perspective on being a broadcaster.
Yeah, and looking through your resume, I noticed some of the jobs that you had. One of them was working in the USHL, like you were just talking about. You were a media coordinator. What did you do during that job? And talk about working in the USHL, because a lot of those guys in the USHL turn out to be really good college hockey players, and then obviously turn out to be some of the best pro players in the NHL. For example, Jack Eichel, he played in the USHL for the US
Right.
NTP, and now he's like one of the best players in the NHL. And I can go on and on about the list of guys, but talk about working in that league and seeing those prospects on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, that job was absolutely unbelievable. My only regret really was that we didn't get to travel as much as I would have wanted, because I was based out of Chicago, and I would have loved to be at more games on a regular basis because, like you said, there is so much talent throughout that league. It's actually how I met my boyfriend. He was coaching in Sioux City for the Musketeers at the time when we both started in the league. But it's just unbelievable. The talent pool is huge between the league itself and then the affiliation, obviously, with USA Hockey and the NTDP. That National Development Program is just constantly pumping out high level talent. And I was fortunate enough to be in the league and working the draft, where they set a new record for American players from the USHL getting drafted. I think we had 55, 13 of them in the first round. I mean, it was unbelievable, being up in Vancouver and watching every single guy that I had covered that season get their name called, and being able to interview them on the best day of their life up until that point was easily one of the highlights of my entire career. It was a really special moment to know these kids personally, and then be there to see the smile on their face when they were wearing the hat and jersey for their new NHL team. So certainly an awesome opportunity working in that league. You get to meet so many people. They have a really strong relationship and affiliation with the NHL, which put me, you know, in the mix with having conversations and working with so many people between the league office and all the different teams, checking in on their prospects. And by the time that I was done, my boss had actually left, and I was running the whole thing by myself. So as I started as a coordinator, I ended up all alone and was running it. And while I never want to do that again, it was certainly really good experience to kind of see how the other side works, not just be the person creating the content, but be the person responsible for answering all the calls and dealing with the PR and doing all of that stuff. So a lot of fun. Never want to write press releases again, but a really good experience. But yeah, highlight for sure was just the amount of incredible talent, and getting to see those guys play now has made me a better reporter, because when they roll into town with their NHL teams, I'm like, oh, hey, I remember you. Good to see you. You know their background, you know their stories. It makes your job easier and a lot more fun.
Yeah, and you got to cover Cole Caulfield, who is now one of the leading candidates for the Hobie Baker Award this year. What makes him such a special player from covering him in the USHL?
I mean, honestly, it's hard to even pinpoint one thing. He's just so good. And I mean, by the time that I got to him, he was already so developed. I only caught him for that last year that he had before making the transition to college. But I mean, between his speed, just being that little guy, but still being fast and just so tenacious, his shot, he's just one of those guys where if he's by the net, he finds a way to score. It's almost uncanny. It almost doesn't make sense, but he just loves to score. He loves to play the game, and I mean, his shot is lethal. So he's certainly one of the more exciting players to watch. And then when you interview him, the kid literally cannot stop smiling. It's unbelievable. You see it out on the ice. You see it when he comes off. He's got the biggest smile and just love for the game. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him make the transition into the NHL. I've heard some rumors that he might actually be joining the Canadiens for this second half of the season once college wraps up. So it'll be interesting to see him make that jump.
And you obviously covered Jack Hughes. He became the #1 overall pick. He's obviously doing a lot better in the NHL this year. What makes him a special player? And were you surprised that he was picked #1 over Capo Caco in that draft?
Oh, I don't think I was surprised. I mean, I know the teams do all their research, and I think we all kind of had the discussion that Capo Caco might start a little bit stronger, but ultimately the longevity of development with Hughes was probably going to have a greater impact. I was a little surprised that he kind of struggled a bit finding his footing with New Jersey, but again, it's still a huge transition. And I mean, he's a young kid trying to make a jump into the league. He was smaller at the time. So looking ahead at this season, seeing the weight that he put on, the conditioning that he did over the summer, I definitely was impressed. And I can see that now all of those really strong fundamentals that we knew were there are starting to bloom and starting to really, he's finding his own and he's finding his game again. And when he's on his game, there's no one in the world better. And he is a ridiculously good player. And there's a bunch of them. There's Quinn, and then we got Luke, who's coming up through the system. So the Hughes family, whatever they're doing, they know how to build hockey players.
Definitely, definitely. And I had the opportunity to interview someone from the NTDB, Thomas Bordwell, who's with Michigan now. So it's really cool just to see like how talented those players are and just how they're going to develop over the next few years when they make the NHL. Now you got the opportunity. You said you got your first hockey experience working for the Rochester Americans, and you said in an interview, "I learned everything that made me the reporter I am today." So I want you to elaborate more on what you learned during that experience that helped you for your reporting today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at that point when I was starting with Rochester, I had only done Sideline with Geneseo, so I knew how to talk. I've always been good at talking, and I think that's probably still apparent to everyone that interacts with me, but I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to do lighting. I didn't know how to write a script. I didn't know how to do anything basically that you need to do this job, especially when you're starting. So my time there taught me how to use Adobe Premiere and After Effects and all of those incredibly important platforms for the behind the scenes, part of the job, which, if you're in this industry, you know that you don't just get to show up, talk on camera and go home. You have to, most of the time, film yourself, edit yourself, light yourself, mic yourself up. Like, you need to know audio and lighting and all of those things. So working in Rochester taught me all of that, taught me how to green screen and build a set. It taught me how to, fill out game reports and write game previews and do game recaps. And I got to practice everything from writing to the broadcasting to creating my own show. I made some documentary style videos, which were more like focus pieces on, specific topics, long form video. I mean, the list is literally infinite. I learned how to become everything you needed to be, that back backpack journalist, so to speak, so that when I did get to my first job in Erie and they said, okay, great, it's Friday night, we've got all these football games, we need you to go do a live shot from this game. I knew how to set up my camera, set up a live box, and do all of that by myself, which is not easy. And internships are invaluable. And that's why, with everything being crazy right now with COVID, I hope they go back to normal for the sake of all the students and all the aspiring reporters, because getting that experience of being with a team or being in an in-person environment and setting up your own lighting and setting up all that, just learning everything that you can in person, you can't do that really over the computer. And so that's why I hope it goes back to normal as soon as possible, because internships are an invaluable tool for learning. And I know they're a little different nowadays, but regardless, just that experience, like I said, gave me everything that I needed to get my first job and then build from there.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate enough that I have an internship this summer, so I'm looking forward to it. It's my first ever one, so I'm interested to see how that goes. I'm very excited to see how that goes. But you had an internship with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and you were talking about that a little bit during the beginning of this podcast. What was it like working for an NHL team for the first time, and what did you do for that team as an intern?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it was super exciting because it was my hometown team, and it was a summer internship, so it made sense. I lived at home, and it was actually in like TV production, video production. So when I first got there, I kind of just was going through what I expected, which was filming a little bit, but mostly just doing a lot of backlogging and labeling and editing and creating small packages. But again, just right place, right time, and always being ready for any opportunity. They actually had a girl who was supposed to do on camera work that didn't show up, that wasn't able to be there, who was a reporter for them. Next thing I knew, they were asking me to do stuff on camera because I told them, hey, this is what I really want. So you never know what you're going to get out of an experience, which is why it's always important to put yourself in a position that even if it's not the perfect job or the perfect internship, you can make the most out of it. So for myself, they started having me do videos. I ended up getting to interview prospects at development camp, traveling and going out in the community, doing features in the community, youth hockey stuff. So it was really great. I got to kind of experience the behind the scenes with the editing, but also getting in front of the camera and seeing how an NHL organization is run a lot more strict, which obviously, I expected, and I've seen again now that I'm in Florida. The AHL is, it's a lower level and there's just a little bit less pressure. So a little bit more freedom and a little bit less eyes on you. So you can have a little more fun maybe at times, but it was very helpful to just see how an NHL team was run, build that professionalism, again, build those networking contacts. And my main goal was really just to say, hey, look, the NHL is on my resume, so this can't hurt.
Yeah, did you get to cover Crosby and Malkin, or were they not there during that internship?
No, so because it was in the summer, I didn't really get to interact with
Yeah.
any of them. It was actually, gosh, at the time when I was doing it, we had Kasperi Kapanen who was coming in. He was one of the big names in camp. Brian Dumoulin was just starting out. So it's funny now looking at these guys where they are in their careers and having interviewed them when they were at D camp for the first time, getting interviewed. Jari was there. So it definitely a crazy road for all of us. But no, I actually didn't cover them, but when I was in Erie, because I was in the market to cover a lot of pro teams being positioned between Cleveland, Buffalo, and Pittsburgh, I got to cover the Pens Cup run for 2016. So I was there covering them every single playoff game that I could get to and the whole Cup final. So I gotten to interview Crosby and Malkin and Hornquist, who was with the Penguins at the time, and now he's here. Fleury, who was my favorite player growing up. I loved him, and I still do. He's such a great personality. So yeah, again, just an example of that sports job. While it might not have been glamorous, there was still a lot of perks, and getting to cover the Penguins winning a cup was pretty amazing for me at the time.
Was Jake Gensel part of those development camps? Because he was emerging like in the 2015-2016 season, from my
I think
memory.
it was right before him because this was in 2014 that I was there. So I think
Okay.
I'd missed him by a bit of time. But he's another guy that obviously has the ties to college hockey and the USHL and everything. So certainly someone I've paid a lot of attention to, and he's had a great story. But no, the ones that stick out for me were Dumoulin, Kapanen, and Jari being at camp at that time.
Now, when you interview Sidney Crosby, what is he like off camera? Because we obviously know he's super professional on camera, and he's obviously the greatest hockey player of all time. But have you gotten the chance to talk with him off camera, and what's he like off camera as well?
I've never gotten to like personally chat with him because when Crosby's in a room, they are the media and the PR there. They protect him like he's a crown jewel in a museum. I mean, they've got things pretty locked up around him. But I've definitely been in the room and seen him interacting with other guys, and he just strikes me as the ultimate team guy, and also just so obsessed with hockey. I mean, it's honestly all he cares about. I know they always joke. It doesn't seem like he has a personal life. And I don't know anything about that, but I definitely do know that hockey is his absolute number one love. I've seen him when he's on the practice rinks at the Lemieux Center in Cranberry, which is where the team practices when they're not on games. And, it just seems like he's always working. It's pretty much nonstop for him. And so, yeah, for him, it's definitely hockey first, but you can see he has fun. He's still, he's a great team guy, and you can see the way he interacts with the guys on his team, and he enjoys it. But yeah, you save the conversations in the room are usually for more of the fringe guys, or Fleury. Fleury was always finding ways to chat with everyone because he's just such a friendly person. Hornquist, actually a really super friendly guy in the room, and I haven't gotten to experience that yet in Florida, but he's an awesome personality as well. So all I can say is the first time I walked into a room and was within arm's length of Crosby, I didn't think it was going to throw me off, but it definitely takes you a minute. Grow up and that guy, superstar, he's huge. It's crazy. I mean, you always see it on TV, but in person, I mean, the guy is an absolute beast.
Yeah, no, I had that same feeling when I went to a Bruins game and I sat right in the glass for warmups, and it was a game against the Oilers, and Connor McDavid came all around and he was right behind me in warmups, and it was just, I don't know, something about it's like there's this aura about some of those star players, and just being up close to them, you can just see how talented they are and how someone like me would never, even if I practice like every day, would never get that talented. So it's crazy to think about.
Yeah, Connor McDavid is another special one. When I worked in Erie, it was the year after he had left the Otters, but a lot of his teammates were still there. I actually worked with Dylan Strome and Alex DeBrincat a lot, and now they were in Chicago, and I've seen them on the road trip since, so it's been great to watch them come up. But McDavid is another one. I covered him for his very first game coming to Buffalo, which was a big thing because, the McDavid-Eichel storyline was huge back then with seeing who was really going to come out on top, and obviously we know how that ended, at least right now. McDavid's winning that one, but it was great to get to interview both of those amazing talents and get to see them in person. And like you said, some guys just have it and it's a gift. And with McDavid, the speed alone is just absolutely a God-given talent because that is just unbelievable. He can turn on a dime and be gone without you even blinking.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. That draft could have been, if Austin Matthews was born like a month earlier, it could have been McDavid, Eichel, and Matthews. Just crazy to think about
what a year.
Now, you're now working with the Florida Panthers as a sideline reporter. How did you get the opportunity to work for this NHL team?
So for me, it ended up actually coming down to a lot of really great opportunities through networking. I was fortunate enough to have created a relationship with Dale Talon at the time, who was the GM. And when I was in Vancouver working the draft for the USHL, Dale was obviously up there with the Panthers. And he kind of heard rumblings that they might need a reporter for this position. There was going to be some changes to the broadcast team. And so through a family connection, I was able to meet up with Dale. We got coffee. He told me a little bit about it. We had a good conversation. Some time passed, and next thing I know, I was getting an interview opportunity with the Panthers. And I think it all started, the draft is in June. I didn't come down to Florida for my audition until the end of July. Then I didn't even hear about the job till mid-August. But it was a whirlwind experience, getting to fly down and audition and see the Fox studios and get to meet Randy Moeller for the first time, who I work with now on a regular basis, and audition right next to him was really a really unique experience. But, I can't say enough about, just how great Dale was in giving me an opportunity. One of the best things that he did when he was here was just his belief in young people and how much he really loved to see young people succeed. And he was very good at identifying talent and bringing the best out of everybody around him. So for him to, have a connection to me through family, see my demo reel, see something in me that he liked, and then follow up years later and give me this opportunity when I got down to Florida. I can't thank him enough. And it was sad to see him go, but that's the business. Obviously, hockey is an ever-changing revolving door on the operations side. But yeah, Dale Talon gave me a really great opportunity. And all of my superiors here at the Panthers who I work with, Adeline Biedenbach, Randy Moeller, Sean Thornton, they have all really given me so much opportunity, and I've been able to, take that in stride, and it's made me an even better reporter. But yeah, just networking is everything. I guess that's all I can say. Never take a conversation for granted. You never know what's going to happen.
Definitely. And since you're on TV a lot, how do you handle the nerves of being on TV, knowing that thousands of people are watching you? Because that's something that I need to work on, because it's just scary to think about.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think for myself, just growing up, like I said, I did performances. I loved musical theater, and I loved acting, and I loved being the spotlight. So I kind of got lucky in the sense that the nerves were never necessarily something that like really was struck into me. Of course, I get nervous every single time that they're counting me down to a commercial. That never goes away, but you just learn to prepare even more. And the more you prepare, if you know you're going to, you can do it. It's really just a matter of the preparation to make yourself really feel that extra level of comfort heading into it. But I definitely can say that my background in just being a little bit more outgoing and being a person that liked to perform, and I get kind of that adrenaline rush. Everyone does, of that, the high of, going on camera and getting to know that there is this pressure on you. It's kind of similar to being an athlete in its own way. You know what you need to do, you've prepared, but you still get those jitters. But again, preparation is really the main thing. And for me, just also having fun with it and finding ways to just make it your own. I don't ever write stories or try to do things that aren't me and aren't something that I'm comfortable with. I don't want to talk about things that I don't understand. So if there's something I need to understand better, I'll understand it before I do a story on it. Or if there's certain things that just are not my forte, I just won't talk about them. You just have to kind of cater your job towards what you're good at, because then when you do it, you'll know that you're able to tackle it, and then you won't be as nervous.
Yeah, and when you interview a player, how do you do research on them and figure out what questions to ask? Because I have the luxury of doing a podcast where I can talk to players for 40 minutes, 50 minutes. However, you only get to talk to players for around a minute. So how do you figure out which questions to ask when you have such a short time to talk to the players?
For sure. For myself, what I always try to think about, and my family has helped me a lot with this, is because you're just interviewing them and it's in a very specific moment for a very short amount of time, I try to think about what would the fan at home be wondering about, or like what would they want to hear. I mean, anybody can ask a guy the same question of like, what do you guys need to do better in the next period? I mean, of course, it's a question. And sometimes if there's nothing else that you have to say, you have to ask questions like that. But I always try to think about what the fan might be wondering at home, whether it's a big hit that happened, and how did that affect the way you guys felt on the bench? Or, when you shot that puck, were you trying to score, or did that just really get lucky? Was it a pass? You're trying to find ways to think about what the fan would be interested in, because at the end of the day, our job is really to be entertainers when we're on a broadcast. If it's a more long form interview where you're getting to sit down with a guy and really dive into a few like more personal topics, then that's one thing. But during a game, during a broadcast, what's the most interesting thing that happened in the last 20 minutes? Or what's one of the biggest storylines heading into the game? Or what's one of the most exciting things that happened to kind of conclude the game? And then how would the fan, kind of interpret that? I like to try to think of the best questions to give them the insight that, they're maybe not getting from just watching the game.
And what do you watch when you're watching a game? What are you taking notes on? Because every time I'm at a game, I see the sideline reporter, they have a notebook. So like, what are you watching throughout the game, and what type of notes are you taking? And is there anything specific you're looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I like to always keep track of statistics for special teams. So whenever we're on a power play, I'm always keeping track of, okay, are we 0 for 1? Did we give up a goal? How's our PK doing? Things like that. I'm fortunate enough that like I get to listen to the broadcast while it's happening in my ear. We have earpieces in. So I'm also taking a lot of notes on what my color and play-by-play guys are talking about. What are they drawing attention to? What are big stats that they have that I don't? Or, you know, if a guy scores a goal and maybe I'm not aware, but that was, you know, his 50th goal of his career or something, you know, important, a milestone. I'm constantly jotting those down. Is a guy on a streak that I wasn't aware of and they mention it in the broadcast. I'm constantly taking notes on things that they're talking about, particularly the color analyst, because he's pointing out elements of the game that are very impactful. You know, is our forecheck, you know, too strong or too weak? You know, are we not getting pucks in the right way? Are we getting beaten? Takeaways, things like that. Because ultimately everything I'm taking notes on is I'm trying to use to help myself when I have to ask questions. So it's really always geared towards that. What am I going to ask a question about in the next intermission? But then for myself, like, you know, just in reflection and coming up with stories for the next game, things that stand out. I like to go back and look through my notes, and they're not pretty here. I got a, what is it? We got a Shorty and 3 for 3, 4 for 4, like all these just crazy things about the power play. Ekblad now at 10 goals, 6th season in a row with 10 or more goals. So just crazy all over the place notes, just trying to keep track of everything that's going on.
And you also get to cover Joel Quenneville, who's obviously one of the most successful coaches in the NHL. What's it been like covering him, and what have you learned about the game of hockey under him since he's so knowledgeable? And I'm assuming he has so many stories about the game. That'll be fun to listen to.
Oh, Q is awesome. He's easily one of the best coaches that I've ever gotten to work with. First of all, from like a professional standpoint, being a reporter, that was my first year in the NHL, and interviewing coaches is the scariest part of the job, in my opinion. You just don't want to make them angry because you have to deal with them every day on such a regular basis. They are your lifeline so often for information. So you really want to build a good relationship and not ask a question that's going to tick them off or get them on your backside right away. So I'm very lucky because Q is such a professional, and even if you don't ask a great question, he knows you mean well for the most part. He's not going to bite your head off. No shame on John Tortorella, but if you ask him a bad question, you may never live it down. Q is really graceful and just very educated, and when he answers questions, he's so thoughtful, and you can tell he's ridiculously smart. Just hearing him talk about the game has allowed me to see it in a different way, just how he analyzes it, how he evaluates, you know, a victory or evaluates a loss, what he thinks is good, what he thinks is bad, how he identifies talent. The list goes on, but he's just good at all of it. And just to work with him on a regular basis is awesome. He's also a really fun guy. He likes to have a beer after the games. You'll see him at the bar. He's bought dinner for all of us broadcasters on more than one occasion if we eat at the same place, and he's hiding in the corner with the other coaches. He's just an incredible guy. So from a professional and personal standpoint, just beyond lucky to be covering a guy like him and working with him on a daily basis.
Now, I have to ask you this, but what is your way too early Stanley Cup predictions from the regular season from what you've seen so far? I'm curious to get your opinion. I'm going to be super biased. I think the Bruins are going to win. They're a great team. Tuukka, Bergeron, they got some good young guys. I love Coach Cassidy. I think they have the chance to win. But honestly, like, who do you think will win probably?
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's a tough question. And when you work for a team, you kind of have to be at a disadvantage, and you're obviously going to be biased. And if you had asked me this last season, I think it would have been a crazy stretch for me to give this answer. But I'm not saying we're going to win the cup, but I do think we are going to make a serious run. There's just this atmosphere and this vibe right now that if it continues, at least, I mean, we're halfway through, a lot can change, but knock on wood, if things keep going the way they do, there's just something about this team that is just infectious. It reminds me of teams I've seen go on runs and win in the past. The Capitals are one that I kind of keep referencing, the way Ovechkin and Oshie, and they were just having fun, and it worked, and everything was going their way. And right now, it feels that way for Florida. I definitely think we'll see Vegas making it far. I've been really pleasantly surprised with Minnesota. Colorado has an unbelievable roster, so you can't count them out. You just mentioned Boston, so they're always a contender. Tampa's the defending champs, so even if they're not number one at the end of the season, they're always in the conversation, and all they have to do is get into the playoffs and they know what they need to do. I think this year, having won last year, now they're like, okay, we've won the regular season and lost in the first round. Now we've done our thing. We've won. If we get in, anything can happen. But that's the case for everyone. So I hate making predictions. So I'm just going to say I really think that the Panthers are going to make a good, solid run at it. I'm superstitious. I'm not just a little stitious. I'm very superstitious when it comes to my hockey. So that's all I'll say is I think we're definitely – this is our year to go about as far as I think anyone expected ever.
Yeah, especially with Barkov, who's having an amazing year. Huberdeau's having a good year as well, and the goaltending has been great to watch as well. So they have all the pieces in place to definitely make that run. And Tampa doesn't have Kucherov this year as well, so I feel like that's a factor to consider when
he's starting to skate though, so we're getting nervous.
Yeah,
try to keep him off the ice as long as they can.
Another
but
team
I have a feeling when he gets back, I mean, who knows what can happen. But right now, with the way these guys are playing, like you said, Barkov, Huberdeau, Verhaeghe is playing unbelievable. A really awesome, pleasant surprise. Duclair has had injuries and is starting to kind of get back in the mix and find his stride. Ekblad's having one of his best seasons. Weir is awesome. Radko Gudas is hitting everybody and making our team feel invincible, and Hornquist is amazing in front of the net. So we've got pretty much everything you could need to make a run at it. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, another team that has been impressing me this year has been Toronto. They've been killing in that North Division in Canada, and Matthews has just been insane this year. He probably will win the MVP in my opinion. So I'm curious to see how they do, especially since they don't have to go against Boston in the first round, which has been a kind of a thorn in their spine throughout the past few years.
Yeah, I'd say Boston is sort of their Achilles heel. So without them in the mix, it'll definitely make an impact. Yeah, between Matthews and McDavid up there in the North, the offense is off the charts. Not as much defense, but certainly a lot of goal scoring. So it'll be interesting to see how that translates. And I'll be interested to see how the North Division teams fare when they get back into the mix with the rest of us down here in the U.S.
Definitely. Now, my last question to you is, what advice would you give a person who's trying to make it into sports media like myself?
For sure. I mean, we touched on a lot of it, and you had so many good questions. So kudos to you for picking up on a lot of the right things. But like we talked about, internships, super valuable. I genuinely cannot stress enough how important it is, not just for the skills that you're learning there, but also for the connections that you're making. I mean, you never know when a team that you worked for is going to need someone in your position a few years down the road. Having that relationship with people there already, showing them what a good worker you are, and then applying for a job with them is almost a no-brainer. So those are really, really valuable. But then in general, networking, like I said, there is no conversation too big or too small. And that's why I love always basically, you know, anytime someone reaches out to me, I try my best to respond and, you know, give them time, because I know what it was like. I was in that position. I've got guys and girls from all over now that'll be asking to chat, pick my brain. How did you get here? And it's crazy because I never thought I'd be in that position. So asking those questions and building those relationships with anyone who is in an industry or in a job that you would want to have someday, I've done that. I've reached out to probably every team in the NHL at some point over the 5 years when I was trying to find my way to this career. Building connections and just reaching out. People will save resumes. People will remember names. And when you have actual conversations like we're having, and I've had with lots of other people in this industry that are trying to grow and climb the ladder, that is the perfect way to solidify yourself as someone who doesn't just want to get a job, but is really serious about learning and being better. And those are the people that stick out. So internships, networking, never, you know, taking for granted a phone call or a conversation. Those are the most valuable things. And then at the end of the day, just loving the sport. If you want to work in hockey, or if you want to work in sports in general, follow it as much as you can. Pay as much attention, be as knowledgeable as you can. And it's what you love, so it should come easy. You know, you should enjoy what you're doing when you're watching the sports, and it'll ultimately make you better at your job.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Katie, for coming on. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best for your media career, and thank you so much for the time. I really can't say thank you enough. It really means a lot to me, and I'd love to have you back on the podcast any day. And you're one of my favorite sideline reporters to watch, and I really admire your work. And thank you so much for everything. It means a lot to me.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun chatting. We talked for a while and it felt effortless. I mean, great job to you. I had a lot of fun being here, and let's talk again real soon. Maybe after the playoffs, once the Stanley Cup's awarded, we can look back on our predictions.
Definitely, definitely. Talk to you later.